did they forget the CD? And she's like, no, I think that's it. But the guy came back to me. He's like, yeah, a lot of people like to collect the CD sleeves. I'm like, you know what else a lot of people like to collect? The motherfucking CD, bud. Tell me, how did you get into music to begin with? Because we've had a lot of acts on. I'm sure if you go through the list, you'll be like, oh, I know that person, and I know that person. Is he interviewing my friends to get to me? Is that what this is? But how did you get into music?
How did I get into music? Man, honestly, I love and hate that question because it's like,
it's pretty bland.
No.
Hold on. Let me.
No. No, not because of that. It's because my answer is garbage. Like, I don't have this like, well, I met Johnny Cash when I was 11, and like,
you never met Johnny Cash when you were 11. Oh my God, what a loser!
I know. People hate me. But no, I don't have this like really cool, interesting story about how I got into music. Like, I've always been like very obsessed, and like the more I talk about it, it's just like, I think as a kid, I always loved listening to the radio, and I always had music on, and I always fixated, like if it was the Olympics, I fixated on the music before the performance of whatever they were doing. And like, I've just always innately been obsessed with listening to words and like hearing songs and wanting to learn more about them, and almost always cared less about the artist than I did about the song. Like, it was just kind of how it was.
Yeah.
And then I started growing up like idolizing gals like Shania Twain, and like everything started to kind of change. But I always was performing. Like, I was always in sports. I was always in plays. I was always in singing competitions, and I was always like doing like choreographing dances and like performances in my basement. Like, I was always just doing that. So it just felt natural to want to do something more, but I never knew how I was going to do it. Like, I had no idea at all. And like, even still to this day, I'm like, how am I going to do it? And I'm just doing it.
I think, no, like, I like the answer. The only thing I want to kind of go in a little bit on that is like, explain how it's kind of like the Olympics to you, because that's kind of trendy where we do have the Olympics now.
Not like the Olympics. It was when the Olympics were on.
Oh, okay.
I listen more to the music than watching the performance.
Oh, okay.
Like, I was just like obsessed, like everything that had music in it, I was like obsessed with the music. Like, I was always fixating on that. And like, I really loved Fantasia because it was so music based, and everything had this like rhythm, and like, it was always so cool. And like, soundtracks to shows and movies. Like, I hate movies. I'm like, I do not enjoy it. I love documentaries, but like, for me to sit down and watch a movie, like, I would rather like pull my own.
No. I feel you on that one. It's like when my friends call me weird because it's like they'll see every movie or any movie that comes out. I think the last movie I went to theaters to see was like Step Brothers. And then I think if it's not Step Brothers, it was That's My Boy. And I'm a big Adam Sandler fan, but that one made me walk out. I'm sorry, Adam. If you're out there listening, I'm like, do better.
Here's how much I hate movies. The last movie I saw in theater, which was like way before the pandy popped off, like way before, was a Fast and the Furious one in D-Box. So like the ones that are like moving.
Oh, geez.
And I didn't even want to go. I just had friends that were going, and I was like, cool, this is my excuse to like eat like a cornucopia of popcorn and like jam chocolate bars in my mouth. Like, I have no desire to be here at all. But I was always obsessed with the soundtracks. Yeah. I always wanted the soundtracks. Like, that was, I don't know. So yeah, it's just been like this innate thing that like, it's just been like kind of like in my blood. Like, I've always wanted to do it, and I've never been able to shake it. Like, it's never been something where like, oh, it's not a phase, Mom.
I understand, because like when you're talking about the movies and like the soundtracks per se, growing up, like, I went to see the Pokemon movie, but I like the Pokemon soundtrack. It's like when I'm a big wrestling fan, so it's like, obviously when you see the soundtrack that they do for pay-per-views, you're like, oh, I'm amped up for this. Like, even though I know like the outcome is planned and all that, I'm like, it's still amped up. So I go back and I don't remember the movie, but I remember the music video. I think it was like Aqua's Turn Back Time, and they used it in a movie. And I was just like so fascinated. I'm like, I'm never going to see the movie, but you kind of sold the interest to me to go see the movie based on the soundtrack.
Right.
And I was like, okay, you're doing your job as marketing. That's great. Like,
yeah,
there's a whole Pokemon CD, I'm sure somewhere here that has like, it's almost like today when someone announces like a touring date and then you have your headliner and then the opening acts. And this Pokemon CD was almost like A+ talent. And I don't know whose bank account it was coming out of, because it was like Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Britney Spears, Christina. I'm like, who is paying for all these people to like sing these songs on the CD? It's like, this CD is $10. I don't know how you're doing this.
I mean, that's like the Pokemon industry. That's not industry, but like the Pokemon business. What is the word I'm looking for? It's
brand?
Like, yeah, but there's another word too. But anyways, it's just like, the Empire. That's what I was
there you go. Yeah.
Empire has a boatload of money, and I'm sure that music supervisor was able to be like, the exposure is going to be insane.
Oh, it
like,
was.
But yeah, it's the soundtracks are always really cool, and I don't even know if movies do soundtracks anymore. I have no idea.
No, like I think there's maybe like a few depending on the give or take of the movie, or like, you know, what music was involved. But I feel like nowadays where you have Spotify and all these platforms, if you just take your phone and put it up to like, I don't know, the movie you're watching, and it's like, oh, you mean this song? You're like, okay, instantly download it, boom.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, why make a soundtrack? I think like a lot of artists were even debating this of like, when you're coming out with CDs, it's like, man, why do we come out with CDs when people are just going to pick the song that they like and pay for it? I'm like, that's fair. Back in the day, if you wanted to listen to Backstreet Boys, it's like, turn on Much Music, and it's like, can you help me do the dishes? Mother, like, I'm going to miss the video. It won't be on until another 5 hours. It's like, I don't care.
It's on the countdown. It's coming next.
Yeah. It's like, Rick told me to stay here. Rick Campanelli just told me that it was going to be up in the next 5 videos. He lied to me, but he got me sitting down to watch this. And now you want me to help you do the dishes. Like, how rude are you?
Inconsiderate. The audacity.
Yeah. And then, like, you'd go out and buy the CD. You'd learn more about it. But yeah, that's pretty much how you came across music. And like, I'm sure if you tried that today, there's going to be people like, yeah, I know what their singles are, their hits, and that's all I'm going to buy. But I think the pro to buying CDs is sometimes there's little gems in between it that they're not going to release for a chart, but you end up liking it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, also just like the way that music was before streaming, like there was this like really cool factor to like, you didn't know what was going to be on the CD. Like listening to a CD top to bottom, like obviously we can do that now, but I don't know, maybe I'm just looking at it differently because I grew up with CDs, but like, it's just different now when someone releases a whole thing. It's so easy to just skip a song.
Oh yeah.
Or not even listen to it based off the name of the title. Whereas when you bought CDs, you listened to the whole record up and down. Like, I miss those days.
I had a more of appreciation, I think, for like, and it's cool now in hindsight when you hear them talk about a certain CD that they released back in the day and finding out, like, I can't remember which 2 songs it was, but like I'm a big Backstreet Boys fan, but it was like one of the things that they mentioned was they were debating of which single they were going to put out on the CD to release it. And it was like, I think one of the songs is Don't Want You Back.
Okay.
And then like Nick Carter was explaining, like, it's funny because when like 4 of the other members go at one guy of like, yeah, it was totally his idea. And then he's like, hold on now, wait a fucking minute. Like, I'm not the only one that came up with this, but like, they're all like, we wanted to do this song and Nick wanted Don't Want You Back and blah, blah. And Nick was like, hold on a second. Like, I was not the only one that requested to do this, but don't throw me under the bus. But I love those things because you're like, oh, I'm glad they went the other way because that one obviously did better than this. But buying a CD, I believe like Vanessa Carlton's 1,000 Miles. I mean, obviously everyone knows it, but like when you go buy the CD, and I think it's on this CD, there's another one like Ordinary. I think it's like Ordinary Day or White Horse or there's ones like, and I'm like, I wouldn't have fucking bothered. Only before I bought the CD and listened to it, I'm like, great. I think you should have released these songs as well so that people know more that you're not just 1,000 miles.
It's so true.
Yeah. And that's not a shot at Vanessa. Vanessa ever watches this episode. I love it. Like, you go to request Vanessa Carlton for an interview, and they're like, yeah, she'd love to do it. And then it's like, actually, she actually seen an interview you did where you dissed her. I'm like, I didn't diss her. I told her that I love the CD and that she could have released more.
And I gave my advice about what she should be doing next.
Yeah, I gave my advice to a person that's well off, doing better. But sure, listen to the Newfoundlander in his room that still has Christmas lights up here. Come on.
I mean, it's fine.
Yeah.
It takes all types.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned about like documentaries too, like watching music documentaries because, or just documentaries
in general. Yeah.
Yeah, like I watch a lot of the music ones, and I don't know if you've seen this. Now, feel free to say no. I'm not going to get you to lie on a podcast.
Don't worry, I would never lie.
But like, have you ever seen like the Oasis documentary of like their band? Oh, it's so good.
Is it good? I'll watch it.
Oh, it's good because it's like, you know, they don't get along. But there's parts of it where it's just like, yeah, that guy was an asshole, and I can't believe I was in a band with him. I'm like, yeah, okay, but like, you still was joining a band. And he's like, I can't believe we're brothers. I'm like, me neither, but I don't know how you survived so many years to make great music. Like, I feel like every night after stage, it's like, no, why didn't you sing the way I wanted you to sing? It's like, I wrote the song, just sing it the way I want you to sing it.
It's so funny. Like, I don't think I could be in a band dynamic. Like, not because I feel like my ideas are the best ideas or anything like that, but like, I think I just couldn't deal with the drama like that, because there's always going to be tension, like there's always going to be something going on, and I feel like that would just make me bananas. Like, I wouldn't enjoy it because I don't know, I'd be too afraid of upsetting somebody or doing something wrong, or someone's breathing down your neck about something. Like,
That's why I do a podcast by myself. I used to own a podcast with 3 other dudes, and they just cut me out. No, I'm not kidding.
I was like, what?
They're like, yeah, it's like when you go to, actually, it's going to be funny, but it's like if you go to podcasts and there's like, you know, 2 guys, 1 mic, or 2 goalies, 1 mic. I'm like, there was definitely an alternative version of that where there was like 4 or 5 guys that were in on it. And then that's why you have all these different podcasts where it's like 1 mic, 1 dude. I'm like, no, there was probably more than 1 mic, 1 dude, but now they're all separated. Like,
100%, you're so right. They've just gone off and done their own thing.
Yeah. It would be funny if you have their whole episodes are just basically them bashing each other. Like, I was once on a podcast with this dude, and maybe we had like 50 episodes, but let me tell you the real behind the scenes. I'm like, can you just do the podcast that you wanted to do? Like, whatever, sure. I feel like that's going to be.
Sure.
Yeah, like I feel like that's like the new music ones where it's like years later, and I'm sure it will come out, and this is my prediction, where like Noel and Liam will have their own podcasts, and the whole episodes will just be them bashing at each other. And I'm like eating popcorn, like, love it. Give me more. Give me more.
I mean, if that happens, I'd probably listen or watch or however it shows up. Yeah. I mean, like, I really love the concept of doing a podcast, and I've always kind of wanted to, but I just don't have time or energy. But like, I don't know. I like podcasting. I watch Your Mom's House a lot.
Okay.
With Tom Segura and Christina P. But that's the only podcast like I watch religiously or listen to religiously. What do you listen? Do you have a podcast you listen to religiously?
So I will be full disclosure here with this, because it's like, you know, the worst case is to lie, and then people come back years later and be like, Brian said this on a podcast that wasn't actually true. But I'm like the anti-podcaster, because it's like, I like doing interviews. And because I grew up like in a media environment where it's just like, I watched a whole lot of Conan O'Brien. So I like the late night comedy and interviews. Like, it was mind blowing to me when I was smaller and I was doing communications. I was like, I want to be a comedian, but I want to be taken kind of seriously, but I want to interview people. And they're like, what kind of job is that? I was like, you're right. And then when I turn on like Conan, I'm like, that's it.
That's it. Totally.
Yeah. So like, I like podcasting because it gives me that kind of platform. But now ones that I do listen to are probably just like TV shows that just turn into podcasting, like sports ones that you miss at 5 o'clock, but then they put it on a podcast. Right. I've listened to some of Conan's interviews because I think he's a little bit more free range on his podcast.
Yeah.
And it all depends on the guest too. Like, I listened to a Bob Saget's one when he had John Stamos on because I liked Full House. And I just like that they get a little bit more dirty in terms of like their language. Right. And I'm like, you're not getting that on Full House, but I like their stories. Like, I love ones that you go back and there's stuff you watch and you get the behind the scenes stuff. Like, if someone came out tomorrow with like a Friends podcast where they have, even if it was just like Matt LeBlanc and Matt Perry, or like, and then every week there's different guests or whatever, I'd be like, I'm invested. I want to learn more about this.
Unpopular opinion. I'm going to lose. Once this goes live, I'm going to lose followers.
Yeah.
I don't like Friends.
Really? Everyone has their own.
I don't. I hate it. And and when like all the reunions happened and they did that little spinoff whenever not long ago, I was like, I don't give a shit. Like, I don't care. I never liked it. But that's my thing is like, I've never been a TV show person either. Like movies and TV, like people that were obsessed with like Seinfeld and Friends and like Will and Grace and like whatever other TV show they loved. I just never was. The only show I have ever watched top to bottom and revisited episodes is Peaky Blinders.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I love that show. Like love. Like would do anything to be in that show and have Thomas Shelby marry me. Like love it. Have you ever seen it?
I've never heard of it.
Oh my God. Okay. It's these like gypsy gangsters in Birmingham who like run the place. It is, but they're like super fancy and they like do all these like crazy deals. Oh my God. It's so, I shouldn't be getting this jazzed about a fictional TV show.
No, that's fair. It's like when if I ever come across someone that has like a Boy Meets World shirt on, or they talk about Boy Meets World, I just go, I own like nuts. They could be there with like, it could be like a girlfriend and their boyfriend, and you just hear the girlfriend go like, man, like Corey and Topanga were okay, but Corey and Lauren, and I'd be like, maybe like 2 or 3 rows over, you're like, I totally agree with you. Like they should have did that. And then the guy's like, back off. That's my girlfriend. I'm like, back off. We're having a conversation about women.
I did love Topanga, but I think I love Topanga because of her name.
Yeah. Do you know there was a time that I think people had, I think she even said in like interviews that people had sent her letters at this point and said they named their dog after her. They named their kids after her. I'm like, okay, a dog maybe, but a kid, I feel like growing up, it's like, why are you named Topanga? It's like, my parents loved Boy Meets World. Just let it go.
Oh God, that would be so awful, especially nowadays to have your name be. No offense to any Topangas out there, but if you are, tell us. We would love to.
Yeah, someone just joins the chat. It's like, I really loved your movie, Parker, but now I am unsubscribing from you because number one, you don't like Friends, and you made fun of my name, Topanga. the one fan member
that would definitely be how I lose fans for sure. I haven't made many, and I'm already losing them. Great.
Yeah.
It's for me.
It's just like you're trying to build a fan base and you're losing it just based on your injuries. I feel like I could come on here tomorrow and it's like, we've got this great podcaster from Newfoundland, blah, blah, blah. And in the moment you're like, yeah, I don't like a lot of mainlanders. And then they're like, all your mainlander subscribers go. And I'm like, why? What happened? It's like, you called us mainlanders. I'm like, well, yeah. It's like, I'm on a rock. You're on a mainland. What's the difference?
Same.
Yeah. Like, come on. Like, you guys can come after me and be like, what do you live under a rock? I'm like, actually, I live on a rock. On it. Yeah, they're like on it. Yeah, they're like same difference. I'm like, actually, no. If I was under it, I'd be getting crushed. On it, I am the owner of this rock. Oh my God. But no, those are like a long-winded way to go into the music side of things. Yeah. But, yeah. I want to ask you, because when you mentioned, of course, like watching examples like Shania Twain, who were some other influences that you had, like, that you idolized, I guess, in music? They were like, you know what? One day, I would like to do what they do.
So, I mean, I was in like Shania, Celine Dion, Leanne Womack, Trisha Yearwood. Like, I was in the OG world, and like not just country, like the Christina Aguilera's, the Britney Spears. I grew up with that, like the TLCs. Like that was. I looked at them and I was just like, I knew I wanted to do that. Like watching all of the award ceremonies and stuff. And like, I mean, I was obsessed with the Spice Girls when they were a thing, but it always changed. Like I never really, like I always loved, like would continue to love an artist, but I was always looking for something new and something different and something like really fresh. And I mean, I grew up on country and then kind of like evolved over to pop and like left country for a while and then came back to country and then like left it and then came back. And like, it's always been this like ebb and flow, but even like the Ellie Gouldings of the world and like the Lords and the Adeles and Like there's so many, I don't know, there's so many like amazing powerhouse women. And like I've always loved male artists too, obviously, because who doesn't? But like for more reasons than one. But yeah, I would say them. Like I always just looked at it and was like, I just knew I wanted to do it like that.
It's interesting because like I grew up so in the 90s as well, but it's like I looked at, say, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, but like it's funny to me because my one moment that it's interesting that you're doing interviews now with all different types of acts, because I would watch like the Much Music Award shows and stuff, and like when you see a new artist win an award over like your favorite, I remember I was at a friend's house and I can't remember who it was that I wanted to win, but I remember Fall Out Boy won, and I wasn't really into Fall Out Boy this time. Now I love Fall Out Boy now, but I was just like, those mother flippers, like how dare they take this award away from this artist that I wanted. But now in hindsight, I'm like, well, if that same artist won every year, even to this day, you would not get new talent. You would not get, and I'm just like, I feel like if there was like a cycle where you go visit past Brian, I'd be like, they're there, Brian. It's okay. You'll like them in the future. It's like you're complaining years later when Fall Out Boy loses to some other person.
Yeah, it's so true. Hey, like you were so dedicated to these folks, but I think it's just because you don't. At that age, you want to listen to the hits, not make the hits, you know, or like be influenced. You want what you want because they're just like you idolize them on so many other levels.
Yeah,
it's weird and interesting. And now we're like, we want new artists. Like I'm always looking for new artists.
Yeah, I have like double-edged sword to me where it's like when you send out like press requests or whatever to certain acts. And then they're like, it's like you're looking for like a semi-big name or a big name. They're like, he's not doing interviews right now, or she's not. But how about this act? And I'm just like, oh, this is your like kind of olive branch of like, you know, maybe if you interview this person down the road, you can do that. And to me, it kind of feels like, oh, like, but if I don't do this interview, I feel like I burnt a bridge because I'm never going to get that act on. I'm not saying that you will, but I feel like it's a learning curve for me because some of the acts that I've interviewed that came out that way, I'm like, man, this was a much better interview than I expected because they appreciate any press or any exposure. And I'm like, good, less pressure for me, but also good for you because now you can say, well, I was on this podcast, blah, 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 that like 3 people watched. And I'm like, that's 3 important people.
Hey, well, and you never know who, like if we're talking about numbers, it's like, you never know who that person is and if they needed to hear what you were talking about that day. Like it's, and like, you never know who's going back to watch it. Like there's so many elements to that. And it's funny because I come from PR. So like understanding that like any press is good press and like, you never know, like it could be that one person reads that article every month, but if that one person is someone influential or knows somebody to tell somebody else, like it's just, you just never know. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like it's a wild world, but to your point, yes, most of the time I feel like it is like, well, maybe not them, but we'll extend the olive branch for this person. It's like, probably part of it is like, you know, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's like, it's all kind of relative too. Cause like I look at it from the perspective of like PR too. Cause I went to Carleton and got a communications degree. So that's where I really wanted to go. Originally into PR, but like I looked at it from the standpoint of when I was 12, or I think it was like 11 or 12, I had like a full-on stroke.
How do you remember things at ages? Your ability in this conversation so far, the number of times you've like referenced an age, I can barely remember what I did yesterday, let alone being like, well, when I was 12. Yeah. Like, I don't even know what I can't even tell you what 12 years old me looks like.
I'll write here. No, I just pulled this blank piece of paper.
Like I journal everything.
Here are the events you have to tell everyone on every day. You had a stroke. You do this. You know that. And it's like, okay, I got it. You're like going down in the world. It's like, hey, Brian, how are you? I had a stroke at this age. And then like, all I asked you was, how was your day? I love Backstreet Boys. I just remember it just because they're like crucial. I guess they're things that, you know, when you go to high school, university, obviously you have parties. I was never invited to a party, so my brain cells are still here. So that's how I remember it, because these are like moments that are like key to me. But yeah, I just remember.
You had a stroke when you were 12?
Yeah. So like, to different people, it's different things. It's like some people will clarify it as a seizure, some clarify it as a stroke. But I was in the hospital for a few days, and you didn't know the outcome. I didn't know the outcome. So like, I'm a big fan of Detroit Red Wings. They sent me a boatload of stuff. WWE sent me a boatload of stuff, and I just think it's funny because that's I think when my perspective was like, this is PR. PR is basically like the good guy. Now at 29, I'm like, PR is sometimes good and sometimes they're a pain in the ass. Like literally, like I emailed WWE and Detroit like years later, and I'm like, man, like when I was younger, you really helped me through a tough time. Like, that fucker made it. God damn it. Like, we thought he was going to die. That's why we sent him all that shit. But he made it, and now he wants more.
God damn it. Now he wants to talk to us.
Yeah, now he wants to talk to us about that experience. And it's like, we can't do that. We don't even know. We send out a whole bunch of stuff. Like, do we let him know that he wasn't the only kid we sent?
Yeah, right?
I'm like, no, that's cool. I was just hopeful that you would have a conversation with me, but sure.
It's funny, too, because in those situations, too, often, like, companies latch on something and hope that it it would be nice. Like, I hope they're okay, but it would be nice if we got other press from this. Like, nobody's talking about it, but everybody's like low key kind of hoping that it like turns into this bigger thing. Like,
and I think that's like, I get it from the double-edged sword of like, from PR, like you want all the exposure you can get. But like to me, there's also like the human nature side of things where I'm just like, why don't you just do it for the sense of, you know the story. Like,
yeah, I think some people do. Like, I mean, when I was in my last organization, I did that a lot where I was like really like, because I saw parts of myself in folks, and I was like, if I was back in my old shoes, like I would have loved someone to have like reached out and done something about it and just done it for the good. Yeah. But there's a lot of people that are just opportunists, and I mean, like. What's that line in that? It's like it's Diplo and who is it? Is it Benny Burgess? It's like, if all the cards in Vegas were aces, or if all the cards were aces, there wouldn't be no Vegas.
Yeah.
Like that's just life. Like it keeps it interesting, but people can be shitty.
Yeah, it's like dealing with it from the two different ends of it. It's kind of like, you like it when they come on a podcast. You like it when they do things like, actually, if I can hold on, let me see if I can find it here, because it's just make a few jumps here. Oh, look, see, PR police heard us and they're not happy.
They're here.
Well, I got this because I sent out a request to Luke Combs. Now it's on my fridge, but they sent me this. It's like a Luke Combs signed CD sleeve. And when it came in the mail, like the guy made it sound like such a big deal. He's like, Luke Combs is going to send you something. I'm like, Luke Combs is going to send me a shirt. He's going to send me a hat. He's going to send me something. And it was a signed CD sleeve. And I'm sure they told me that it was signed by him, but I feel like that's just like a basic autograph signature. I mean, I still like it. It's not like I'm like, oh my God, shit on this. I just felt like, great. But there's a part of me that's like, you couldn't send me the CD along with it. Like at the very least.
I was just about to ask, like, did they not just send you the CD?
No, like they made it sound like he's going to send you something super big. And then in the mail, mom was like, this little thing came, like she just tossed me an envelope and it was like maybe this big. She's like, here you go. And I was like, okay. And I looked at it. I was like, did they forget the CD? And she's like, no, I think that's it. But and the guy came back to me and he's like, yeah, a lot of people like to collect the CD sleeves. I'm like, you know what else a lot of people like to collect? The motherfucking CD, bud.
I find that's interesting. I've never heard someone just send the sleeve.
No, I feel like I should be the person now that goes to every artist and be like, give me your sleeve. And they'll be like, what?
And honestly, too, you know what, though, now that I think about this, that's such a weird thing. Because it's like, we don't actually want you to listen to the music.
Yeah. It's like,
we just want you to read it.
Yeah. And, it's like okay, let me read it. I don't even know if like, let me see. Yeah, it gives me like out there, memories are made of. So it gives me the CD, like the track list. I'm like, well, that's great. I will know all your track list. And then when I go to the concert, I'll be like, Luke, I never heard the song, but I can sing along. I mean, I can read along with it. Over here, Luke, over here.
Luke, we're not sending you any shade. We're just laughing at.
No, absolutely. I still love like Luke to this day, but I just like it's more or less on the PR part where I'm just still like
totally.
I'm sure if Luke ever heard this episode, if we had Luke on, I'm like, Luke, this is what they sent me. He'd be like, Brian, I will fix that for you. I'm like, the only way you're fixing this, Luke, is a live concert in my room. And then I'm just
honestly, if you ever interview him or if you ever get close to, you have to tell them.
Oh, I will. I'll be like, listen, I'm not like even bad mouthing the PR as much because I think it's a funny story. And obviously maybe that's what their point is. Maybe like now when they see this episode, they're like, our plan worked. He mentioned it.
Well, we just talked about Luke Combs for like 3 minutes. So I think it worked.
Yeah. They're happy about it. They're like super thrilled. I want to ask you, like, now during, I guess kind of still in COVID, but we're getting there. We're getting to the light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully, in some regards, I hope I don't get canceled because people are like, actually, Brian, we're not even close. I'm like,
yeah, I know. I'm very much so anticipating another lockdown in the fall, just to be like prepared, you know.
Yeah. But how have you dealt with it? Like, because I asked this question to a lot of acts now, but it's like, you know, when it first started, people were not like, there were some acts out there like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to do Instagram Live. I don't want to do these Instagram stories. Like, this is a part now where I can just calm down, do what everyone else is doing, and just, you know, not be relevant for a bit of time.
Yeah.
Other acts were like, oh my God, how can I keep my fan base entertained? Especially if you're just starting, like you're just starting to gain ground before COVID.
Yeah.
So like, what was your, I guess, 2 cents on that? Like, did you try to stay active? Were you kind of in between?
Yeah. So COVID was, I mean, I don't want to say it was a blessing, but I definitely saw the silver lining and I saw an opportunity. So I was always really big on social and I was always like wanting to make my social presence be there and be tight and like talk about things that I cared about. And I think I leaned in more to like talking about things that I care about now more than just like really nice content. But I did a showcase in March. It was like March 2nd or something. And then the world shut down. So like, I was like, I had that showcase and then I was like booking shows like crazy. And I was like sick, like, here we go. And then everything got canceled. And I was like, okay, pivot, I guess. Like, I think we're going to change this. But, you know, I released the first single in January and it was like, okay, here's this. So now I've got some space to like release the next single. So I really just use it as an opportunity to like build up my fan base and like be present on social. And I didn't do really any lives, but I would go on I wouldn't do any like live shows, but I would go on Instagram Live a bit more and I would like dabble on my keys and like haphazardly play piano because I'm so bad at it. But like I would just try to be me on the camera as much as possible. So I was like a human being and people could relate to me and like kind of put a name to the face. And then I like dove in so deep to co-writing. And I spent like a good chunk of my time just co-writing and meeting with people across Canada and the US that, you know, mostly were just only willing to write in rooms. And like or people who were just everywhere because we all went to Zoom. We had like, that was what we had to do. And I found an app called We Should Write Sometime. And it's like a Tinder style app. And there's like producers, songwriters, like music folks of all kind. And you could just connect with them and then you would just book sessions. And I was like, here we go. This is what I'm going to use. And then that just ended up introducing me to a couple people that then opened up the field for like all these other folks. And I just started writing like wild. And so then when it came down to having like starting to release, which seemed sketchy in the middle of COVID, like in January and even releasing last month. But I was just like, I'm going to use this time to like push press, to push as much content out about this. And like, maybe people are going to just have the space to listen to this stuff versus if you're in like your normal day to day and you just want to listen to the music that you like. Honestly, like, it was very challenging at times with COVID because like I struggled with my mental health. I struggled with like just being segregated from people and like not being able to live my life normally. But at the same time, it was like the biggest blessing because it allowed me to just like focus on music and like focus on my stuff as a new artist and like put myself out there versus just like pushing to do shows and like doing it that way. Like, I feel like I have a better base and I have so many new songs to come out with and so much new stuff to just test out. So I'm kind of like, I got lucky.
Yeah.
I got super lucky.
It's interesting that you mentioned, of course, about like the writing rooms, because like a few acts now that I follow on like Instagram and stuff, you'll see them in their Instagram stories. Like the one that comes to mind of recently is like Jess and Tay, and then
Yeah,
they've
I love
posted
those
like
girls.
yeah, like in a writing room or writing
Yeah,
session tonight, blah blah blah. And like I'm a big fan of not, and I've said it to them many times, so it's not like again being bluntly honest with them. I'm like, there are times I'll watch their like Wine Wednesdays, and like they get it. Most people do. If you're on like Instagram Live for 20 or 30 minutes, people like bounce in and out all the time.
yeah,
And like some of the stuff that they mentioned in their Wine Wednesdays, I'm like, oh, it's really interesting. Like I like, especially when they talk about mental health, like the same way that you just brought it up too. It's like,
yeah.
I like when people bring it up because you're not kind of like, oh yeah, all the time during COVID, I was fine. It's like, yeah, no. Or like all the time during COVID, I was panicky. It's like, no, obviously not. Like there's a middle ground there, but
Yeah.
I like that they get people to ask them questions. Now, whether that's 5 people, 25 people, whatever, like they still do it. So
Yeah, I mean, I've struggled with mental health my whole life. Like, and like when I grew up, mental health wasn't a thing yet. Like it wasn't
yeah,
like openly spoken about. And like mental health runs in my family. Like I didn't recognize what it was until significantly older. Like, and I went through like a really bad point in like November, December. It was like really bad. And I went on meds just to like level me out. And like I'm so grateful I did, because had I not done that, I was just so low.
yeah,
And it was just like I was just so unhappy. And I wasn't inspired, and I wasn't motivated. And I know that like, and I've always been very big for like big advocate for therapy and to other types of treatment like acupuncture or traditional Chinese medicine or other
yeah,
things to help you like be your best self. And I I was very afraid to do any sort of medication to like bring myself up, because there's so many negative connotations around it, and like people think it's such a bad thing, and I'm like, no, it's not. Like we all need things to like stay level, and our bodies do weird things, like, and you need to talk about your feelings. And I have so many friends that like tried to play it cool through the pandy and were like, yeah, it's fine. Like I've been fine. And I'm like, uh-huh. And then a lot of those people broke down like 3 months ago, or
yeah.
like as we were coming out. And I'm like, you can't hold this shit in. Like we have to talk about it. And I just like, I feel like the more of us who have platforms like this, regardless of how big or how small, I think we all need to be better at just being like, yeah, I'm messed up too sometimes. And guess what? It sucks.
Yeah.
But if you talk about it and find your outlets like journaling or meditation or working out or whatever it is for you, like,
Or just rage.
yeah.
Like I said earlier before the interview starts, like your niece comes in the room. Hi, Brian. How are you doing? like, did you just throw your niece? I'm just like, I'm sorry. I'm so mad. They're like, excuse me. Maybe fix that. And I'm just like, are you okay, Molly? She's like, I am glued to the ceiling. I'm like, I'm sorry.
But we have to talk about it. Like, I think it's part of our, like, this is very glorified, but like our civil duty to like, talk about it and make people who are younger than us or who are not familiar of the signs or not not recognizing that what they're feeling, A, is normal, and B, is also not normal. Like you don't have to be sad all the time. Like you don't have to feel like you're not worthy. Like it is so hard to get through. And I mean, the pandemic definitely, oh God, it was a roller coaster. Like there were times where I was like, this is sick. I am killing it. And then there was other times where I was like, I am feeling so many emotions and I'm going through so many like backlogged things that I just haven't processed yet because all you had was time. Yeah. Oh boy.
Well, I like when you, obviously when of course you're talking about mental health and more people being open about it. Like my two kind of stories on mental health, and I feel like it's safe to say, because I've had other guests on that talk about mental health, I've kind of opened up about it on certain aspects too. But there was like two jokes that came to mind, and like it's personal, so people can be like, don't do that or whatever. I'm like, it's just how I dealt with it. But there was one time when I was looking for work in Ottawa, like trying to find media jobs, and like you're getting like 50 to 100 no's, like no, like, and you're just like, I'm doing what you wanted me to do. Like I'm doing what society wanted me to do. I've got my degree. I've got like all this background and nothing. And I was on like I think it's like Ontario Disability or whatever. So they give you, and I always felt bad about it. And like people like, don't feel bad. And I'm like, no, listen, to me, it's like a disability is like someone in a wheelchair and they can't find work. I'm capable of finding work. It's just that it's not happening. So I felt bad for taking a check. Yeah. And there was one night that my brother was downstairs with his partner eating pizza, and I looked at my bank account and I could afford a pizza. But in my mind, I was just like, man, $20 out of my bank account, and I'm still gonna have like $300 left. I'm like, I can't, man. It was like one of those nights where it's like everything going wrong. And I made the joke to my friend. I'm like, it got so bad I couldn't even order a pizza. And he's like, are you okay though? I'm like, yeah. I had to explain it to him, but like it was just one of those points where you're like, man, this is like low. Like I could be in media because I've done it and it's not happening. And I was just like, I laugh at it now because I'm like, man, you could afford a pizza. Maybe you don't get the pineapples on the pizza, but what a big deal. Big deal.
No extra cheese.
Yeah. It's like I can't. It's like, guys, I ordered a pizza last night. Oh, was it good? I couldn't get the extra cheese. And they're like, really, Brian, there's people out there starving. I'm like, yeah, I was starving too. I couldn't get the extra cheese. And then the other one that came to mind to me is like when you were talking about, of course, going on like say medication. And I look at those commercials and I make fun of it all the time because it's like, do you have depression? Take this pill. And it's like side effects include more depression, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, so basically you're either saying you're going to get cured or you're just going to die. So it's a win-win depending on how you look at it. And then people are like, that's kind of dark. I'm like, well, to that person, we don't know.
Totally. You know what is though? It is kind of, I mean, it's scary taking something that you don't know and then you see those crazy commercials or like people talk, like people will say stuff and they'll be like, oh, it made me so suicidal when I started taking it. It's like, well, there's also like a hormonal imbalance happening and things need to shift and level out and change. And like, that's so scary, but you also like perpetuating that storyline and like continuing that narrative of it being like a bad thing is not helping. Like folks need to know that it's okay. And that's why I hate those commercials because people see that and they're like, well, I don't want to feel worse than I feel now. It's like, well, you're not realistically like, if you have other tools in place, like you're going to be fine. And like, did I feel a little garbagey the first little bit? Yeah. But guess what? Like you kind of just have to, I'm like a million times better than I was then. So it's like, you just have to do these things sometimes. And I just wish it was more normalized.
Yeah. I feel like there's certain aspects in society that like we're getting there with certain topics and certain criteria and stuff. But we had like Michael Landsberg on, who's a big advocate with Sick Not Weak. And I love it because it's like, he's the guy on Off the Record that was always kind of like people didn't like that he was like really drilling people with questions. And I was just being like not super sensitive, but like, just towing the line, don't go across the line. And I asked him at one point, I'm like, during your depression or like mental health, did you ever think suicide was going to be like your only option? And I was like, man, he's going to shut off this phone. He's going to hang up or get mad. And he's like, why are you so sensitive about that topic? I'm like, because you're still new to podcasting. And I was like nervous with interviews. I'm like, I guess I'm just an ass. He's like, no, you're not an ass. He's just like, you're just sensitive. And I was just like, I look back at it now and I'm like, well, it's true. You have to ask tough questions at times, but you don't know how people are going to take it. Like there's some people like, how dare you think that I was going to ever commit suicide for depression? I'm like, well, statistically it is there.
Yeah. And I think it's like, we're still not to a place where we can be like, oh, you've had depression. Have you ever thought about suicide? Like we're not at a place where we can openly have that. Like we can barely talk about mental health normally without people getting their panties in a knot. Like I have friends who I'm like, you got to go see somebody because this isn't like you're unhappy. Like this isn't normal. But if you were to be like, have you had suicidal tendencies or suicidal thoughts? It would probably blow them out of the water because they're like, I don't want to talk about this. And like, we're not there yet.
Yeah. I feel like you're right, but I feel like it's getting there in the terms of like at least people like on podcasts and platforms and stuff. It's not like if you mentioned earlier, I had mental health issues. I was like, oh, okay, well, do you like Keith Urban? It's like, exactly. Wait, why did you dodge that question completely?
Yeah, we have come so far in that regard. Like you're totally right. Like it's but like, and I mean, most people who say like I've had mental health issues, they're probably open to talking about it. But yeah, it's still sensitive, and I hope we can get to a place where it's less.
Yeah, like the one line that he said that I really think is like obviously, what's the best way of putting it? I'll just say it because it's more or less like he said, mental health or like depression's biggest ally is when you don't talk about it, or suicide's biggest ally, because people just think null and void.
Yeah.
And I agree. Like, I'm not saying some people are obviously more comfortable in their own skin, or they don't care what people think. Like, I'm getting to that point at 29 where it's like, whatever. If I tell you I like Little Mix and you go make fun of me because I like Little Mix, I'm like, all right, sad on you, because I'm just going to go out and like the Little Mix. That doesn't change my opinion of listening to. So if I'm at a soccer game or a ball hockey game and I feel like people are not maybe energized, or I feel like someone's going through something, I'm pretty open with telling them, like, listen, like, you don't seem like yourself today. Is something wrong? Like, you know, here's my story. You don't have to share yours, but here's what I'm going through, or whatever. And like, sometimes they're just like, okay, I guess that I'm not the only one going through it. I'm like, that's it. Because if I had to go to soccer every week and be super happy all the time, and then people are like, man, he's always happy, I'm sure he's not going to relate to me in any way. But then if you tell me your story, I'm like, I relate to you more than you think. Totally. It's just we're just trying to put on a good face here, because you don't want to be the person that goes to like soccer and be like, Brian, are you ready to win today? It's like, no, I'm ready to like fall.
Yeah, like, you don't want to be the person that's the wet blanket. But at the same time, it's like we all need to be realistic that we all have feelings and we all have emotions, and we're allowed to feel those things. Like, normalize feeling things. Like, it's A-okay. It's just, it's tough. It's super tough. Like, I'm very proud of how far things have come, and like, I'm proud to talk about it. And I think it's important to talk about it, because it's like, you don't have to deal with it all the time. And not everybody has that like constant level of depression. Like, people just go through it and experience parts of it, or, you know, have to deal with it for a certain period of time because they're going through a lot in life. And like, you don't have to be necessarily like diagnosed to be dealing with it. Like, so I think it's just, I don't know. It's so important that we talk about it. And I love that like Jess and Tay talk about it. And there's so many artists now who are talking about it. And I think it's important for us to keep normalizing it. It's part of our job, I think.
Yeah, I like it's great when like more acts obviously come out with it, because you don't know, like, kind of going off what you said earlier, when like you're watching say music videos or musicians and they're open about stuff. Like, you don't know how many kids out there, even with this podcast, that listen to this and go like, oh, okay, like, geez, they're talking about, like, for the longest time, you know, I obviously idolize Conan, but like, you know, Conan to me, I don't think he has any kind of disability or anything, or like, obviously there's obstacles they probably overcame, and you're looking at it and you're feeling kind of sorry for him, like in the regard of the losing the Tonight Show and then getting this show. Like, obviously you're Team Conan, but there are artists out there like Ed Sheeran that I didn't know how to stutter when he was younger, and to see where he's come now, you're like, there's kids out there with stutters that are like, I probably can't do that. I'm like, no, listen. Ed Sheeran listened to Eminem like all day, and he's Ed Sheeran now. So don't say that you can't do anything. John fucking Mayer was in an airport, and Conan came by one day and told him, when he was just a nobody, and said, you're going to make it one day. And then it's John Mayer. So like, mind blown. Like,
I think, I mean, and this is funny because even the way we started this conversation, like I say that like my story isn't unique as to how I got here or how I got into music, but I think there's a lot of those situations in our personal stories where we think it's like irrelevant, but sometimes those tiny details of things that we think are like unimportant are actually end up being things for somebody else. And it's like, oh, well, I'm kind of like that too. And like, or like, oh, I can do that because of that. Or, oh, I can overcome this because they did too. Like, it's funny that like we can have those moments, but also just like how important it is to like, truly share your true story, like your honest, real story, and being your most authentic self in doing that. Like, it's interesting.
I feel bad for like, just say like, not that there are that many, but I feel bad for like acts that feel like they can't share their whole story in fear of stuff.
Oh my gosh. I think a lot about all of the like football players, NHL players, musicians who are just coming out and announcing that they're gay. And I'm like, as if you had to hide that for so long, because if you said something, it could potentially jeopardize what you're doing. Like, that is wild to me. And I can't even imagine how incredible it must feel to be able to finally, like, after all these years,
Well, I think it was. I'm not 100% sure because obviously it's pretty recent, but I think it was like it's either a Nashville player or a Philadelphia player, and maybe I'm wrong on that team, but that came out that said in hockey that's like the first openly gay player,
Yeah,
and like I
yeah,
believe Brian's Burke's son that passed away was I think he was openly gay as well. But to me, it's like that got to be like you said, kind of weird, like growing all up through hockey, and the hockey culture is a totally different subject in
yeah,
itself, but it's like when you go to games, you have people in the locker room that call you the F word, the blah blah blah, and you're just like staying there the whole time, like I don't think this is a good time to announce my announcement right now. So and I don't think it's going to be accepted. And now it's like you see it where, and I don't mean to make it sound like it's not a big deal, but like I guess in a way it's like a double-edged sword or a catch-22 where I'm sure there's players that are like, great, like I'm glad that you came out, but I'm going to still treat you like you're just one of the guys. And it's like, great, because that's what I want you to do. I don't want you to treat me differently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so crazy to me. Like, I don't know. I'm a straight white woman who like hasn't really experienced a lot of hardship in life outside of like heartbreak, divorce, and like, dudes gaslighting me. But like, I can't imagine what it feels like to have to hide parts of yourself. Because I've always been, what you see is what you get. I swear like a sailor. I have an opinion. I'm often one of the loudest voices in the room. Like, I've always been that way. And like, I can't imagine, like, I've worked for organizations with like, you should have a bit more tact than you. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
But like, I can't imagine having to hide such a significant part of yourself. Like that just feels illegal to me. Like I can't even, and it makes you realize how lucky we are to be living in a world where like things are seemingly starting to change. Like, and how lucky I've been to have, the privilege of being fully myself and it be relatively accepted. And it just breaks my heart to know people have to hide parts of themselves in fear of like losing opportunities.
The example that came to mind, I mean, it might be a little bit branched off differently, but the one that I come to mind with like artists per se, and like not that they're like gay or all this stuff, but like as soon as I was saying it, like trying to be your true self, like I look at the example of Kelsey Kulik, who overcame, cancer, and like imagine if she just was embarrassed by that or didn't want to speak of it. And like, I feel like and I'm not speaking for Kelsey, but I found like there's certain points where she's like, okay, that's the past. Like, let's focus on the future. I'm like, that's fine. But there are people out there that are like, man, like she went through cancer. There was dark days for her. And now, she's married. She's on the way to have a kid, both of them in country music, like, great couple and like great individual. But like, there are people out there that like that story or might feel inspired by that story. And like the odd thing on that interview when we had Kelsey on, I was like, during this dark time, like what music were you listening to? Because I was thinking it would be like Leanne Womack, like, dance or whatever. And she was like, no, it was Metro Station, Shake It. I'm like, really? I was like, okay, interesting, Kelsey. Like you're a country artist. You'd think that you'd be listening to like upbeat country or like if you're in that depression. Even though I love Neil Towns, it's like when I meet my maker, obviously, if I was going through that period, I'm like, oh man, it's going. No, she's out there listening to Metro Station, Shake It. I'm like, good for you.
I mean, when I'm in like the darkest points, I'm listening to the stuff that makes me feel harder. Like the stuff that buries me further in the hole. Because I I love the chaos and I think I'm like mildly addicted to the hurt. Yeah. So I go deeper.
I like my go-tos in terms of like when you're in a deep mood or like on a day, like a rainy day and you feel bad. It's like Oasis Wonderwall. It's Plus 44. When your heart stops beating, like Boxcar Racer. There is. It just goes to like the deepest of deep. And then when it's like a sunny day out, I'm just like, yeah, let's listen to some Len, like Steal My Sunshine. Let's listen to this. Like, it's like the mood of the day. It's like, Brian, it's going to be very cloudy today. What are you going to listen to? One Direction, Clouds, obviously. Come on, that's stupid.
Only songs that the title references the current weather today.
Yeah. Brian, it's a rainy day out. What are you going to listen to? Hillary Duff's So Clean. Or like, Yeah. Or it's like going through a breakup and it's like, are you finally over that person? Yeah, they're so yesterday. Hit the Hillary Duff so yesterday. I'm like, oh yeah.
Oh my God. I can't.
Yeah.
That's
Just
so
put on
funny.
the music that you feel the mood. And then like if people start to pick up on that, you go to soccer one day and it's like Flow Riders put on. It's like I think Brian's really feeling himself today, or Brian did something incredibly not great. So like he's treating women not superior. I'm like, actually, Flow Rider song is all about like this is how we roll, or like
Yeah.
roll it. Yeah. So I don't know. There are like obviously it depends on your mood, but I feel like it's funny to me because depending on like yourself as a person and the type of music you listen to, like I'll turn on Lil Wayne, and then there's sometimes Lil Wayne or Eminem songs where it's not referring to a woman in the best light, and then you're like surrounded by women. You're like, it's like I've known this song since I was 8. Leave me alone. Of course I know the words, and then they're like, but you just sang along with that part. I'm like, okay, easy. I wasn't calling you Diane the B word. Lil Wayne was calling you the B word.
Well, and like I grew up on like a lot of like 2000s hip hop.
Yeah.
And like it's super hard now being in the world that we're in, and like how so much of it like objectifies women and like says awful things about like the LGBTQ community. Like there's so many things about that music where I'm like, I should like really not listen to this anymore. Like I feel guilty. Like I will not listen to R.Kelly.
Yeah.
Like I have removed him from everything. And I think at this point, I'm starting to feel like, should I be like not listening to this music because it objectifies women so bad? Like it's such a weird place to be in, as like
I
grew up on it.
I have come to the conclusion, like I said earlier, about the Little Mix reference, where it's like if someone's making fun of you for like Little Mix, whatever. I've come to the conclusion that like I will. It's one of those. So my example for all cases is Chris Brown. When I grew up, I loved Chris Brown, loved Run It, loved like how he loved the dancing, loved everything. But like now, there's obviously the Chris Brown side. That's like But in my defense, I'm like, listen, I like the music. Obviously, we can talk about the person differently, but the music. Same thing with Michael Jackson. Love the music. We can talk about the person differently, but like, yes, some people like they can't separate it. I can separate it, but like that's not me saying, "Oh yeah, I totally support R. Kelly because I'm listening to Ignition." Like, no, it's more like I love the beat, love this sound, but now the person, let's talk about that. Let's dissect. But totally. But there are people that are like, no, not listening. Like my favorite example that was recent. Now I can't remember the guy's name, which is I guess good on his end. But I think it's like Morgan Wallen, and then it came out like his whole music video, and I was like, oh man, you're done. But at the same point, I'm like, or it's a learning curve. Let's learn from this. Still appreciate the music, but let's give him a second chance here to fix this. But that's how you gotta kind of look at everything. Because if you're just gonna cancel everyone all the time, like I looked at it from the example that people give you is like, don't meet your heroes or don't talk to your heroes. And there's a point of that where I like. But in my field, I would have maybe no one on my playlist for every no that come back and like, actually, Eminem's not doing your podcast today. I'm like, delete all Eminem songs. It's like, actually, Ed Sheeran can't come out. I'm like, delete. And then you go to your playlist and someone's like, Brian, you have no one. It's like, because I asked them for interviews and no one wanted to come on. So I took them out. I replaced them.
They're canceled.
They're canceled on my playlist. But then you don't have anything. So there's got to be the side of you that's like, all right, I get it. It's not great, but I still like your music, because down the road, he could become available, or that person could become available. And you're like, I was always a fan. I just didn't like getting the no. No one does. I would hate to see people like, you didn't get the job interview. Yes, didn't get the job.
Love this for me.
Another no. 20 no's in the backs.
It's an interesting. I mean, with everything that's going on right now in the world, and so many artists not being like, I want to say outed, because everybody kind of has their own journey and things, but like, we're just in an interesting time where we need to be so aware. And even sometimes like doing podcasts like this, right? Like you probably feel it. It's like, ooh, did I just say, like, am I saying something that's a little controversial to the point where like I might get canceled? Like,
all the time. I've been canceled 3 times, but no one's stopping me. No, I'm like,
but like you're constantly worried about like your perspective. Is my perspective like, is it coming from a place like an educated place? Like, and that was, I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine recently, and we were talking about all of the current happenings in the world, from everything from climate change and sustainability to, what's currently going on with our horrific business with residential schools right now. Like, there's so much happening. And we were talking about, like, how do we be the best advocates and allies and, like, take responsibility for things and, like, also communicate and not just be silent people who just repost stuff on Instagram. And, like,
that's the world we kind of live in.
Yeah. And, like, educating yourself is obviously, like, one of the best things, and, like, ask questions and learn and try to be present in that. But, like, it's so hard to not, like, to have an opinion, but at the same time, like, when you don't feel educated enough on something to, like, really provide a solid, not argument, but like a piece of the conversation. It's like,
like an opinion or something that you can back it up with. Yeah.
And I think a lot of us are in the same situation, be it as media or artists or someone in the public eye.
Yeah.
And, like, it's an interesting conversation because it's like, what is the right thing to do? And there's a million and one right things to do. And I've been, like, just trying to educate myself and whatnot, but it's hard to also then, like, watch these artists go through this. And then you have to, as a listener, you, like, feel guilty for participating, even just listening. It's wild. We're in such wild times. And to your point earlier, though, it's like, I hope that this is, like, it made an example, and we can change and we can grow and we can develop. And I mean, country music hasn't always been the most inclusive scene. And, there's lots of situations, not just the Morgan one, that have, like, backed that up. So, like, let's just try to advocate for change and, like, be better. It's funny how hard it can be to be better.
I wanted to play a quick game with you of firsts.
Oh, God. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. Like, before you leave, we're going to play a game first. So I want to ask do you remember, like, your first breakup and how that impacted you?
Yeah. It was to this guy in my home. He lived outside of my hometown. I never have dated anyone in my town. I've always dated boys that live out of my town. And I think it's because I'm too afraid to, like, have to cross paths with them.
You're afraid that you will relate to the F-150 song by Robin Ellie.
Yeah. No. You know what's funny is I'm from a small town. So, like, when she wrote that song, I heard it and I was like, oh, God damn it. I wish I wrote this, because it's so true. I grew up in a small town and every guy I dated had some. You
were the person that left that comment on Robin Ellie's video. We solved it, Robin. We solved it.
Yeah,
no,
yeah, we got it. It was funny because I was so young and I was like, this is the guy I'm going to get married to. It was the first guy I ever, like, loved. And I remember it being like, I remember just being so hurt and so upset and not knowing what I was going to do, and I was never going to find love again. And he drove into town one night to give me back my keychain.
Oh, yeah. And
I remember us meeting at this park and, like, exchanging things, and I was so sad because he wouldn't, like, hug me. And I think it was one of those things where, like, I'd never experienced it before. Like, I didn't know what it felt like. And I feel like it really hurt me, but I don't really remember. Like, when we were talking about this earlier, it's like, I don't really remember, but I think about him often, and the fact that, like, some things just aren't what you think. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's fair. Yeah. Like, I always have, like, the joke side of it is, like, I always have a first breakup where it's like you go to a new city or, like, going to a university and you're like, oh man, like, I haven't seen a person like this before. Or, like, my neighbor looks like, I've never lived next to girl neighbors, and now we do, like, blah, blah, blah. And then, like, you're like, this is going great. And then something blows up and it doesn't go that great. And, like, in that moment, you're like, this is the worst thing ever. But then years later, you're probably like, it kind of sucked, but
you're like, I kind of saw it coming.
Like, there's definitely warning signs to everything that happened. And I just, like, it's like one of those things where it's like, but I think I can do differently this time. It's like, and he didn't do differently.
No.
It's like you want a moderator where it's like, Brian, this time maybe don't engage with the girl right away, give it a lead up, and then it's like, yeah, totally, and then it's like gray screen. He didn't listen to his friend's advice and he went over there right away and so introduced himself and she got freaked out. Yeah, and it's like, this time it will be different. It's like 3 years later. Yeah. It's like still the same thing.
It was not different.
Yeah. Do you remember your first concert you went to? It's like my own. I went to my own concert.
You know what's funny is I didn't go to shows growing up.
Oh, really? Okay.
I didn't. And I don't know why. I remember really wanting to go to the Spice Girls concert when I was a kid, but my dad didn't want to drive me to Toronto.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, what a guy. Yeah, honestly, I didn't really start seeing shows until fuck, man. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was way later in life.
That's fair. I mean, I'm not a big show goer. Like, I know when acts come to town in Newfoundland, like you're like, this is their one time that they're coming because it's Newfoundland.
Yeah.
But like, even if I see them in Toronto, I know they'll do better in Toronto than Newfoundland just because of the audience. Right. But like, coming from a media background, I'm like, I don't want to go to the show if I can't do the interview. And people are like, that's kind of fucked up. I'm like, if you're telling me I get to see Tim McGraw, but don't get to speak to Tim McGraw, I don't want that. And people are like, wow, that's kind of bold of you. I'm like, well, look at my background. I'm like,
I want the best.
It's like, it would just suck if I know I'm right there with Rascal Flatts and you can't talk to them. Like, no. Totally. That's like going to your friend's house and being like, and then just staying outside and be like, I can't talk to you.
You know what? Do you want to know what my first show was actually? And this is not even music, was my parents, for whatever reason, took me to Toronto and let me see the Phantom of the Opera.
Oh. Okay.
That was my first. My parents do not like musical theater at all. Like, they are not Broadway folks, so I don't even know how that happened.
They're just like, let's bring her here.
And I remember I convinced them to buy me the Phantom of the Opera like music book, like sheet music.
Why?
P.S. Couldn't play piano as a child. Like, they had me in lessons, but like it was glorified babysitting. Yeah. So weird. There's a fun fact for you.
Yeah. I wanted to like learn music when I was younger, but it was just never, I don't know, it was just never implemented that I was either good at it or I like talking more than playing. So I feel like if someone came to see my show, I just do like the one strum of the chord and be like, boom. And this is a story about how this all happened, blah, blah. And they're like, it's all words. I'm like, in my defense, Luke Combs didn't send me a CD. He sent me word print. So what did you expect from me? Like, it'd be like, okay, Brian, I understand. It's like opening act tonight is Sam Hunt. They're like, oh, I like how he talks in these songs and he does music. And it's like, Taylor Swift is next. Like how she talks and does music. Closer is Brian. It's like, I think he played one chord. And if I just memorize all the lines he said to his song, I'm good. Yeah. You see covers of my music being out and it's like, boom. And then they just recite my whole like speech. And it's like, who did it better, that guy or Brian? It's like, well, he sounded way better. So Brian's song sucked compared to this guy. I'm like, I need to learn more chords.
Oh my God.
I need to learn more chords ASAP. Last one for first that I want to ask is, do you remember the first album you've ever had?
It was...
It wasn't even an album. I just got a sleeve. No, I'm looking.
What was it? I'm looking it up. Celine Dion albums. I think it was
Titanic. No.
No. I think it was I'm looking. Where's the album list, folks? Oh, it was her self-titled. Celine Dion.
So just Celine Dion, yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty certain that was the one that I had. I'm looking at I think. It was either that one or, I think it might have been Color of My Love, actually. Okay. It was one of the two. I might have had both. And then the only other one that comes to mind, and this was not the first album that I've had, but it always comes to mind, is that Blink-182 record where they have like the blue circle with the smiley face.
Yes.
It was like a big record. Like everyone was like, this is going to be the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, both with the punk rocker at one point too, emo kid.
I kind of like if I had a lot of money or if I had enough money, I'd like to like because I know in the 90s they had it or my brother did where they had like a thing on your wall or you could just put CDs, like a whole bunch of CDs. So and like I would love to go back and like I don't know why because I can just download it and all, but I think there's like material value and stuff where I'd like to have one in my room and just buy all like different CDs that I grew up in the 90s just to have it, just like. Because I feel like my background for podcasting right now is pretty bland in terms of my room. So I don't know where I'd essentially put it. But I just like to have it in the background where I could just point to it and be like, see how much I love music? Like, look at this. Like, look at all this stuff. And then like, have you listened to all these CDs? I'm like, when I was younger, have you taken them out recently? I'm like, they're just CD sleeves.
Yeah.
They're just CD sleeves that all these artists sent to me because I was like, listen, Luke Combs started off. Let's continue this train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what you should do? You should make a Tobin Tonight CD sleeve. And you should start sending it to people.
You know, that's a good idea. Maybe I will do that. I'll have to figure out what I'd have to do. And you know what I'd do on the inside? I just have like, so like he has all his like art or like songs. I would put in like guests that I've had and like, you know, what we talked about. And then like if I send it to you or someone, I'd be like, I was already on that interview. Why do I care anymore? I'd be like, yeah, just share it to me.
Oh my gosh.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Parker Graye for coming on to the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying thank you for listening and good night.